Test, 1, 2, test. Test, 1, 2.
Okay, we'll call our work session, October 21st, 2023 to order. And first we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Are there any additions or deletions from the agenda? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead. We have under here the consent agenda, new hires and resignations. We have none. Okay. And board minutes were in the packet. Are there any additions or corrections to the board minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. Any second to that?
Second.
The consent agenda included the minutes on here. It was listed that way in the board packet. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, the next thing, I think we're going to skip down to student representatives so that they're introduced and they're in our board packets that way. So under 6, under student representatives, there are 3 new student representatives. And one of them is, Patricia Seto? Did I say it right? No? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Trisha Cito, and I'm a senior over at Newburgh High School.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Dr. Phillips, you want to say who the other ones are? You got to talk to each student.
Yeah, last week I was able to go and talk to Patricia and also Esther and Fred. So Fred Sutherland and Esther Muthaya. So I was able to welcome them on the board and thank them. And then I had the I guess privilege of talking to the other students and letting them, telling them we appreciated them for trying and that I think I can find a way to work with them this year in a different capacity. So I look forward to that. So welcome.
I just thought it'd be important to introduce you before we make a motion on that. So we'll go back to the agenda items. So the first thing is reports and presentations under 5. Casey Cunningham.
Thanks for having me. I'm work with Cornerstone Management Group. We're the owner's representative, program manager, project managers for all of the bond projects. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this team And we got a lot of information to share with you, kind of get you guys kind of caught up to speed a little bit on the finances of the bond and kind of where we're at and where we're headed over the next year. And so with that, just make sure everyone has the packet that I kind of prepared. Sorry, didn't get to you in time. Does everyone got one? So real quick, I'm just gonna go through the 5 pages and then I'll walk through kind of how they all tie together. So first page is our executive summary of project budgets by site. So it's real important that you understand this is by site. So each school here, if you flip to page 2, you'll see that within each of those sites, there's approximately 58 budgets that we're managing, at the same level that you'll see in that executive summary is we're managing the committed costs, the current budget, and then costs spent to date, and to make sure we're managing each and every dollar that's spent that's available to us in the bond. Page 3 is our program contingency. So this is basically a worksheet that I work with Larry and Steve and our budget analysts to make sure that we are tracking money that becomes available, money and future projects, and our project contingencies. So this is a worksheet that's dynamic. It changes every week. So it's something we use to track to make decisions with it there. Page 4 is kind of what we call our bond promise, which is what we told the voters we were going to do when it was on the ballot. So this is the ballot measure and kind of gives us our guiding words of wisdom to make sure that we're making good decisions and that we're providing the bond promise to the voters who were gracious enough to vote yes on this. And last is just kind of our final big project that we have is Dundee. And this is an aerial snapshot that was taken on the 18th. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we get to the end, to kind of where we're at and kind of what the status of the project is. So with that, I want to start with the executive summary. So if like I said, school site, column A, column B is our original budget. So this is kind of why the bond promise, I added this into the packet. So we build this budget based on kind of just the written narratives that we have as we start with the team and understanding what we want to deliver. So it's a real generic based on square footages, design narratives that are given to us by the architect and the bond planning committee. So their numbers are, as you can see, are different than our current budget. So as we get through design, we anticipate when each project's gonna be built. So we add inflation to those, and then we understand what contingencies are required to build those. Then that's how we get to our current budget. So real quick, I want to take you to line 15, the bond maintenance funds. That number originally was 16 million. So none of the bond maintenance projects were included in the original budgets either. So then we had a list from the long range plan that included tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, basically by priority, what maintenance projects had to get done in order to keep the schools operating, right? Those tier 1 is the emergency ones. Tier 2 are the ones that we think need to be done in 5 years. And then tier 3 are the ones that need to be done in 10 years. So we were able to incorporate all of the tier 1 and tier 2 into those project budgets. And those have all been complete to date. So what we're working on right now is kind of our tier 3 list, which is, some of the roofs that we were hoping we're going to make 10 years, but that are showing as of right now aren't going to make it to 10 years. So that's kind of the list of what's left to do, is mostly the roofs that were on the tier 3 list that have moved up to a higher priority. So when we build these current budgets, the design process takes us to where we actually meet with the teachers who are going to use the room, the kids who are going to use the spaces. And then we define those scopes. And sometimes that means we added scope because we didn't clearly understand it when we were at the bond promise level, right? And so, just take it to the high school, for example, and Larry was in all these meetings, even more than I was. So this is a little deja vu, but basically we develop a committee and we ask them what we need. And so what we find a lot of times is, okay, well, and to meet a modern science classroom now, we need, better adequate lab space, which makes that square footage bigger, right? And so then that grows that cost, right? And so, these budgets, the 46 million was for the high school. At one time it was 60 million, and we still have to go through the value engineering process to get that down to the 46 million. So we always are managing that, knowing, kind of where we're at in the process as well. So real quick, just want to, as you look at these numbers, understand that the other columns, the committed date to date, that's when we hire a general contractor to do the work for $40 million at the high school. Because the other 6 million is, of course, like soft cost paying for the architect, the permits, geotechnical engineers, the furniture that goes in there, all the rest of the money. Then we immediately put that into our committed column. So we're never overspending our budget because we're managing that committed cost. That's like, what I look at every week when I come and look at the budgets, it's where we're at committed, that we have the money available. So within that committed cost is also a project contingency. So that project contingency is not impacted by the program contingency. So we manage that program contingency. That's line 17. And so the program contingency is where we fund when we have unforeseen conditions. Like we incurred quite a bit of soft soil at both Catalyst and the high school that required some geo-piers. And this was like, $1 million ad for the high school. So I mean, that's where we fund those when we have major scope and design clarifications. That that's where a lot of that money from 17 when it was up in there to cover that. And then so that goes back to kind of where we were at with that program contingency, page 3. That number, at some point, a row E was a lot bigger. And now we're sitting at 2,312,000 left in our program contingency as we, and that's really, that's an incredible story because we are done with all of the work that was in the bond promise, except for Dundee, which is already committed with 100%, of what we need to do to complete that project with 1,344,881 and uncommitted, right? So when we track uncommitted costs, that's how much I know I have left within my budget to finish that project. So those are the pieces that we're tracking, kind of on a daily basis. So I want to talk a little bit about that uncommitted budget column. So, page 1. Yeah, so page 1, that uncommitted budget column, it's labeled E, it should be G. I mean, it should be F. Those got backwards somehow. That's where we make the change order decisions. Like, when we realized that the design didn't have marker boards or didn't have the hardware needed to have, safe exiting, the designer had a deficiency on where our electrified hardware is, that's where we kind of go back to the bond promise of a safe, secure site, and 350 students, those pieces, we're making those decisions within that scope of money is, can we say yes to this ad without going over budget? So that's just kind of want to talk to you like how we make that decision is tied to the bond promise. Steve and Larry are both on every single change order, making sure that we're dialed in and that we're meeting, kind of the goals of the district, but also the goals of the bond and being good stewards of the money. And so they see, 30 to 50 change orders a week that they're processing and reviewing. Our eyes are on it first. I have 4 other project managers who work under us. And, we're managing that, make sure we get the first glance that it's fair and reasonable before it goes to them, and then it goes to them. So, that's how we make the decisions on where and when to add scope. It's all tied to the goals of the district and the goals of the bond. So just, quick snapshot numbers, we're in a really good spot as far as where we're at in the bond, considering that right now we're just deciding where to spend the remaining money. The bond promise has all been either committed or complete after this summer. And so it's a pretty good feeling. Like just a little, kind of also anecdote is the high school boiler project was all added scope that we're able to, was never intended there, but became a tier 1 because we realized all of our boilers had started to fail over the course of the last 3 years. And so we're to a point where we weren't able to fix them. And so that needed to be replaced. And it's a huge undertaking. big new hydronic system throughout the school. It was basically there was 8 boilers in different areas, and now we have, cohesive 3 boilers that serve that main site. And so it's a big project. We're getting to actually start up on November 11th, before the big, or before we get too cold. Right now, we've been running a redundant system where we kept the old boilers on and kind of limping them along as we got through October and early November here. So, but that's a really good kind of anecdote of how we manage that program contingency, but also the project contingency, because the project contingency gave half of that money also in money that was available. And that's kind of, if you go to page 3, we track that projects that may return funds. So at one point in time, this had the Newburgh High School had, $500,000 in there. We were able to use that 500,000 plus 500,000 contingency to pay for the boiler project, which is ended up being about $1 million. So. Before we go forward and I move on to the other pages, any questions on this executive summary?
Yeah, I got a few questions. Thank you for this report. It looks like that you're updating this. This is from, it says date 10/31/23 up at the top.
So this is, we update it weekly, but basically why you see 10/31 is we just use the last day of the month. So it's updated weekly, but this is basically the October report.
Gotcha. I would suggest maybe you change the name of the director of finance.
Yeah, I noticed that too and crossed out on mine.
Anyhow, getting back to the numbers here. So the original budget, a lot of these line items for the schools has changed considerably. For example, the high school, many of them did, right? And I know that with inflation and supply chain disruptions and stuff, building materials went kind of through the roof and stuff. But we were still able to stay within budget or under budget, actually. But my question is, a lot of these, when did they change? When did they go from the original budget to the current budget?
So the majority of them happens basically between, well, it's during design. I mean, so the original budget for Newburgh High School, let's just take it for a bench. Well, that was for the building. Well, it was originally to renovate those existing buildings. So it was $30 million. Well, when we got through their budget exercise with our CMGC contractor of what it would cost to renovate those existing old buildings, it was going to cost, I think it was $32 million to renovate them and $34 million for the new. So at that point in time, we realized we, as a district, decided that spending $2 million to get new buildings, modern state of the art, HVAC systems, that we weren't limping along old systems, the $2 million with us. So that's where the 30, it kind of got up to 34. And I'm using numbers off the top of my head, so these may not be exact. The remaining money that went in there, almost, I think $8 million of the maintenance funds was actually went into the high school for the updating the HVAC. We put a new roof on Sector F. There was, a laundry list of maintenance items that went into the high school project. So that's a lot of what that money was. And so that's kind of how we grow to 46 was, making the right decisions on how to do that, meet that original scope with the science building.
And sorry, you said that money's for the maintenance fund that came out of which line item was that?
Line 15.
Okay, bond maintenance fund. Okay.
Yeah.
So help me understand, why didn't you just keep it as a bond maintenance fund instead of moving those? Why don't you just have that reflected in line 15 in the current budget?
Yeah.
As
So
opposed to move it in under the high school.
the contractor was doing all of the work under that line item 1. So in order for us to manage that most effectively and buy it with one contract, it was better to move that money within the budget rather than because then I have to ask the contractor to have like separate pay apps and it becomes very cumbersome, and we pay for whenever it becomes cumbersome for a contractor, the district pays. So we in order to keep it easy, we manage the accounting piece of it, and they only have one project versus multiple projects within their one project.
Yeah, it just looks kind of confusing to us. It looks like it's unused funds, but it's really, it's been moved.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it's not reflected in that line from what I.
So that kind of, and I wanted to show you a little bit on that bond promise, like it goes down, it was just there was a maintenance line item that was 15.975 million. So when we built our original budget, we wanted to make sure we reflected that bond promise, which it's hard to see in this language, but it was the way that we got to $141 million in the summary was with that specific line item in there. And so that's why that's how it started there,
Okay.
I guess would be the best way of putting it.
And do I assume that line 17 is the same issue, that the 25 million has been moved to
Yep.
other areas?
Mhm.
Okay. So I guess help me understand. So I'm looking at each of the schools. You know, a lot of these, from the original budget to the current budget is at least 50% over, right? I mean, you see that in line 7, line 6, not necessarily line 5. You know, but a lot of them are, you know, line 3 is almost double, right? But line 8 isn't. What's the story there?
So Joan Austin, so there's two things that happen there. The original square footage required for the covered play structure was inaccurate, so that ended up being like half the cost. I think we had a considerable, I think we placed a chiller that had already been replaced, that had been done prior to the bond passing because it needed to be done. There was a couple of items that were on the scope list that didn't have to be done. And so that was kind of where we at. The office remodel ended up being a lot easier than some of the other ones. You know, we just had to add the doorway there.
Okay.
So there's certain, the scope actually got easier at some schools where it got significantly harder at others.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I also have some other general questions, and I think you were on email about an original request that sent back in August. I even talked to Larry before the September board meeting about trying to, and this spreadsheet's great. It's like, I almost like want a little bit different view. Like, well, my first question, just to help me get up to speed and understand, is the bond passed for 141 million. I see under 2020 capital improvement, it was 140,997,978. What is the 22,765 from? What bond premium? How do we get that extra money? What is that from?
So when we sold the bonds, it happened to be at a really good time where we worked with our bond seller, Piper Sandler, and they were able to generate 22,765,000 for selling those bonds. Now, what isn't in there is we actually pay them like almost $800,000 to get you that money. But obviously that's worth it, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, they get a piece of that, but they're really, really good at what they do. I guess would be a good way of putting it. And so they were able to generate, which is probably one of the biggest bond premiums percentage wise that we've done as a bond manager.
Okay.
Comment on that a little bit?
I think I'm good enough with understanding it now. I just didn't understand where the extra 5 million is self-explanatory. It's a match. I just didn't know where the extra almost 23 million came from. That's great on the selling part of it, right?
Yeah.
In July, we had somebody come in, talk about our finances in general, and they were looking at the bonds accounts. And then he provided, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, something about like the bond valuation and the market value. We lost 7 million currently, and we're supposed to look at that like quarterly. So where's that 7 million potential loss out of this 168 represented here?
So I'm going to let Heather speak to that because she's managing that piece of it. It's
That's fine, Heather, hold on. But why is it not represented here? If this is potentially in the 168, we're only 161. We should have it on here that there's potentially $7 million that we shouldn't be like going to 168 is our goal right now. Based on that July meeting, 161, maybe even 160 to be safe is our goal. Right. And so.
Well, I see what you're saying, and I understand the math, but I'm gonna let Heather speak to why we don't track it that way, because they have, even the numbers aren't reflected to what the actual value will be when they sell all the interest.
Sure.
So what we were recording in that $7 million was a difference in market value, not real value. So when they first sold the bond, they didn't record in the budget what was real value versus what was market value. So because it goes on our balance sheet, we're required to track that. So we choose to track that in interest on bond money, which is not part of the bond project. So when we make adjustments to that, to adjust for market value, which that 7 million was a one-time huge hit because it hadn't been done. And now we are doing it quarterly. So when I give you your budget reports at the board meeting and you look in revenue under the line item 410 for the fund, which is our bond fund, you'll see an interest line item there. And you'll see the money fluctuate in there because when we're receiving interest payments in as we're cashing out some of our bond proceeds. And so, you know, if we need money because we've got it, we know we have a huge bill coming from our contractors, then we'll cash out one of our bond notes. And so we'll get an interest payment on that. So we record that interest when we receive it, but it's part of the loss in what the market value was, not the real value. So it's not really, it's a balance sheet number. It's not technically, we lost $7 million and we're never getting it back. Because as we cash out on those bond proceeds throughout the course of the bond, we will get more and more interest. But at the very beginning, because you're not cashing out those bonds, you're taking a loss in your interest because you're not collecting it.
Right, okay, I get that. So the 141, how long is this bond? 8-10 years, was it? Do we know how long this bond is for?
A 30-year.
30 year, well, okay, then maybe that's how much we're paying on taxes for. Okay, so 30-year bond. And we're gonna spend most of this in the first 4 to 5 years, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So is the interest you're saying that we're gaining or losing based on market changes and when we sell, does that impact the 141 line item?
No. Because the 141 was the hard value of the, it was the actual value of the bond and not market value of the bond.
Okay, let me explain that, I can understand with bonds, okay.
It's kind of, so if you look at it like your retirement, you put so much money into it over the course of working, and that money kind of sits there and it accumulates interest. But let's say you pull all that money out early, then they're not going to give you all the interest that you should have earned on that, right? But if you leave it there until you need it, then you're going to accumulate all the interest on it. So what we're accounting for our balance sheet is what we would have lost if we cashed out everything. But we didn't really cash it out. But on the balance sheet, we have to show that as a loss because it's not revenue that the district was able to realize for that year. By the end of the bond process in the 5-year scope of using all these bond funds that we've invested, we will recuperate, hopefully, as long as the market stays positive, we would recuperate that 7 million plus additional revenue for interest received on those bond funds, because it's technically going to be worth it more. When they built the original budget for the bond, they did not include any interest payments in that at all. So that's why you don't see it on Casey's sheets, but you see on our books, we account for the interest. So Casey doesn't, because that money isn't technically available for him to spend because market value wise, it hasn't matured. So towards the end, we may come back and say, okay, so now we've cashed out the majority of our bond proceeds. Now we have this surplus in interest that was generated from the bond investments. Now we can spend that money as well. We won't know what that money is going to be, but we are starting to track it on a quarterly basis. So we report that on your monthly budget reports when you see the fluctuation in the interest line item. Does that help?
That does help, thank you.
Okay.
I still have a couple more questions here. So, I know we're getting to the tail end, like you said, we've done all tier 1, tier 2, asks, tier 3. And as we're finishing up things over the summer, I heard like Maple Rush, there was a roof issue that needed to have extended repairs that wasn't considerably or wasn't budgeted for originally. Now there's a leak in the auditorium at the high school.
Mhm.
So these seem to be new unexpected costs.
Yeah.
So is that all what's supposed to be represented on the third sheet then of this contingency remaining and this NHS maintenance 2024 gym roof and auditorium repairs? I'm assuming that's what those are for.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have 4 projects that were the ones that are grayed out there. Those are the ones that are currently being designed, and those are our estimates. Basically, the round numbers you have, 950, 100, 300.
Mhm.
Those are our estimates for the projects. We are currently in design, and we'll get an estimate at, a 50% design here in the next month. That'll, make those numbers more firm and make sure we have enough money for those projects. And then at that point, we have 2 additional projects that we're looking at. The Joan Austin roof, which we anticipated to be at about $1.5 million as well. And then we've talked about Newburgh High School baseball and softball infield turf, which is construction cost about 1.3 with permits and whatnot in there, we about 1.6.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for you. I do have a question just for, I guess, the general board or you, Dr. Phillips. What else is on this potential tier 3 list? I understand the need of turf, but it was not part of the bond originally as an idea or even thought. And I just don't know if that's the highest priority, what's left.
I agree. I think that we've got a lot of leaky roofs and they need to be done first. Unless that interest that Heather's talking about comes in big, we're not going to get down to number 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless the board votes to do turf before roof, which I doubt that'll happen. So, but it's on the list because it was brought up and we wanted to put it there. But it's at the bottom of the list for a reason.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions about the bond? If not, thank you.
Just real quick summary, on Dundee, I gave you the one picture. We are, it's actually within a week, we've already got all the steel columns up in the building. Glue lambs are up. It's really exciting. You start to see the bus loop structure there. So if you ever get a chance to drive by, it's just worth the drive because you could see a lot from the ground when you go out there. So, but we got a good contractor out there, a good design team, and they're really excited to get this project complete for us, and it's going to be an amazing addition to Dundee out there.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is Budget Committee applicants update. Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, we had that opening for the Zone 4. It closed yesterday. We do have 2 applicants that the board will have to decide on at our November 14th board meeting. So we will send out, they have 1-page applications. We'll send those applications out with the board packet, so you'll have time to look those over. They're pretty short applications. You'll be able to look those over, be able to vote on the 14th.
Thank you.
I have a question or discussion point on that.
Yes.
I had a question last time and I think it was still unclear, Zone 3 never had an applicant. And I think there was a couple people from a certain zone. And I believe at this point that extra person was also Zone 4. So I know they're representing Zone 3, but why not move that person to Zone 4 and then ask for a Zone 3 representative?
From what I understand, if you were Zone 4, but you were chosen at the time to be Zone 3, they are budget committee member in that zone until they're not. And then, so we truly have a Zone 4 opening, even though we already have a Zone 4 in Zone 3. So they're there until they're not. And I guess not meaning their term runs out or they resign.
Okay.
How long are those terms?
I think they're 3 years by the policy. But it's good that we have two good applicants. One of the applicants contacted me because I'm zone 4 and just asked to meet with me for coffee and that I met one of them. And so it was encouraging that people are interested and have good qualifications. And I think you'll see that when you see the applications. Okay, the next thing is a daycare update.
Okay.
Dr. Phillips.
And before I jump into that, welcome, Fred. Thanks for being here. And okay, I'll jump into daycare update. Since our last board meeting, I guess 2 weeks ago, I've had several more meetings with various county folks, local daycare providers. Have another meeting with the county this coming Thursday. The direction that we are now going in is that the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools District is, we have one classroom available at JA. We are hoping to partner with someone to provide daycare. The district won't be running the daycare. We will have a similar relationship with a daycare provider as we have with Lutheran Family Services. They use our building right down the way with the Relief Nursery, or maybe with the health center. Providence uses our building there. So we have the empty room for a daycare provider to come in and partner. That's pretty much where we are right now.
I think you don't know it at this point, but could we have clarification on what daycare means? If that's a preschool kind of learning environment, or if it is simply a, place to have kids, just out of curiosity and what we're looking at as far as qualified programs that will be using that.
Yeah, my understanding is, let's assume we find somebody, right, that wants to partner. They might be specialized, or from what I've told, the need in this community is 6 weeks to 2 years. That's the need. So if they fit that mold, then it, in my opinion, it looks more like daycare than preschool. But if it's 2 to 4, it feels more like preschool to me. So I guess it depends on the age for me, if that makes sense.
Do you know, is this all dependent upon what the county commissioners decide, for the money, the $2.2 million that they have for daycare in Yamhill County?
I don't necessarily know if it is dependent upon that. Some of the individuals that I spoke to today, they were willing to partner and they didn't even know about the county's money. And so, I've also been clear to people that we don't want to be the fiscal agent for county money. So if the county wants to give this partnership some money and giving it to the partner, that's great. And maybe they can pass savings on down to the families from the money they get to the county, from the county. That answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
I know we might be, I might be jumping the gun, it's still for ways out. Guess my only suggestion, if it is a partnership and we don't need to put forth except for the room, they do have access to the building and other kids. I would ask that we make sure they go through our background process, any workers there. Even though it might be a partnership through somebody else, they might have their own background, but I think we need to make sure we're covered on ourselves, because they're going to have access. I've seen that room. They have a door right into the main commons area, not the commons, but just the hallways, and they can easily access whatever they need to. So
Got it.
Any further questions, discussions? This sounds like it's fairly preliminary at this point.
I believe that's, yep.
Well, I want to make sure that we're not sort of undercutting other daycare providers. I don't know what the parameters are of partnering, and I think we have to be mindful that if we're not charging overhead or, costs for janitorial, I mean, that would be a little disconcerting to me. I think we need to have some, it sounds like it's very preliminary, but when we get a little bit further down the road, I'm nervous about this concept of just, making it such a great deal that then they can lower their daycare rates, because then only a certain amount of people are going to be able to access that. Then who's going to take advantage of that? Is it so?
Other questions?
No, I just say thanks for getting back to us and just keeping us updated since it is so preliminary.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
My only concern is always liability, and also that it doesn't, anything that happens doesn't take our focus off K through 12 education. Okay, if no further discussion about that, the next item is future work session ideas. And these are ones that board members have shared. And one is a budget training, one is one about student achievement and the curriculum and what's happening in that area. And the last one is a new Oregon law, which is Senate Bill 732. And that it will be an ad hoc community about equity. So are there other, we don't need to set the time or dates, or but if people have a discussion about these.
I was gonna say, I was doing some reading on the Senate Bill 732, and it does, looks like ODE did put out some guidance for like some timelines. So just want to make sure that we reviewed that. Looks like starting 2024, they have some suggested timelines for when to go about doing that. Awesome.
Any further about the presentations, discussions? Okay, if not, we'll go to board action items. We need to approve our student representatives. And so welcome to you, Fred. And also we welcomed Patricia earlier. And I understand Esther has a athletic event and wasn't able to be here tonight. So is there a motion? This is in our packet, a motion to approve the student representatives?
Yeah, I moved to Newburgh Dundee Public School Board's directors approve the student representatives, Patricia Cito, Esther Mathai, and Fred Sutherland for the 2023-24 academic school year as presented.
A second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? I guess. Any opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Okay, the next thing is approval of the Tiger Manufacturing and Heather Bixby.
So one of the things that we've been working on is kind of getting more opportunities to our students in our CTE programs where they've kind of dabbled a little bit in finance, the finance side of a business, specifically with Tiger Manufacturing and is it the Tiger's Den that Kaylee Tolley does, is kind of helping them learn like how to do purchase orders, how to do invoicing, how to write checks, how to manage a budget, how to do all those things. So we've been kind of working with them with the students that hold those positions in those groups, Tiger Manufacturing and Tiger's Den. And one of the things that we wanted to do is to give them the full experience. They're doing so much of the work anyway, and they've kind of just simulated the process, the finance process. And so we thought it would be a great learning opportunity. And we have the means in place to help them learn and expand their knowledge on the finance piece of it. So what we've done is we're looking to create a Tiger Manufacturing checking account where they will have Tiger Manufacturing checks and they will pay their own bills. And they will run through our accounting system, through a PO process, through an invoice payment process. They will do invoicing and accounts receivable. But this allows them to have a good picture of what all is really involved in a major business at a higher level, but it still allows the oversight to make sure that they're doing things correctly and provides for a teaching opportunity for them. So we like to create a checking account and as a like the general fund checking account would be the parent account. So none of their money goes into the general fund. It would just go into their Tiger Manufacturing account, and they would pay their bills out of that. But we would be able to oversee that, help them with bank reconciliations, help them with audits, help them, learn all these other pieces that they haven't been exposed to, and maybe, further their interest in the finance world, and, looking at business from the finance side. So we asked them who they would be interested in having as check signers, and these are the people that they suggested, and we agreed with it. I don't want to be a check signer on their account. That's not my job. That they know what bills they need to pay. And so I just want to be able to oversee it, make sure that they're learning correctly, make sure that if there's errors, they've learned how to fix them correctly, because that's all part of the learning process. So that is what this account is. It's not an account that currently exists, and it's not commingling funds with the district. It would be separate funds, and their money that they raise would go into this fund.
So just to be clear, the three individuals' names here, and one each representing a different title or the area of focus, I guess. These are students and not adults.
So we have 2 students and their advisor. So
Okay, so
they're
Patrick is the,
the student CEO. Oh, yes. And then we have the finance person in Tiger Manufacturing. So that one student. Then we have Jessica Chaffee, who is the finance secretary at the high school,
okay,
who is there to help her learn the process, can help her do POs, answer questions about our accounting system, the whole 9 yards. And then the advisor, and their checks will require 2 signatures.
Okay.
And so we thought we'd just put as many realistic things in place for them just to make it a great learning experience for them. And that's what we're hoping to create. So
sounds great. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that there was,
1 student, 2 adults.
Yeah.
Sorry.
no, that's good. And then I was also wondering to know, yes, them have or your ability or what you do kind of help with the audit. That sounds great. But then like, I didn't necessarily want you to be like, hey, I got a question, and like be asked questions every day, right? And so it sounds like either Jessica or Patrick would be the person to answer those questions. The day-to-day questions, maybe you might get a higher level questions that they can't answer.
Yeah. So finance questions, Jessica can answer the basic ones. There's other staff here in the district office that can answer those questions as well. But if there's, a question about compliance or laws, rules, regulations, those kinds of things, then I'm happy to. And it does give, by doing this, it does give me the ability to oversee, but we're responsible for that money too. So I need to be able to tell you guys that that money is accounted for and that they are doing things correctly. So I do need to have some visual oversight of them, and having them using our accounting system is one way to get that, but it's a huge opportunity for them to learn a new system and learn a new part that they haven't learned before.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that the Newburgh Dundee Public School Board of Directors approve the Wells Fargo checking account and signers for Tiger Manufacturing as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I'm gonna sneak out of here.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Thank you. The next things are all business things for the board, basically. And these, all of us, our very first meeting when we were all in shell shock. We got the whole packet from OSBA from their trainer, and quite a few of the information is that on this list is from in that packet, and the rest is on the Oregon School Boards Association website. And so the first one is the board's expectations of the superintendent. Any comments, anything? These are basically straight from OSBA. We've had them in our packet and I hope we've read them. Okay. The second one is evaluating the superintendent. As the public knows, there's three main jobs for the Newburgh School Board. One is hiring and evaluating the superintendent. The second one is policy and the third is budget. Those are the main oversights. And so this is from the OSBA website, evaluating the superintendent. Thanks for the, it's to be a positive experience for the board and the superintendent, but it's one of our responsibilities to do every year. Any comments or questions?
Just a general comment, more procedurally. It
Okay,
looks like each of these items we're going through. Are we trying to do one motion for all or one a motion for each line item? To approve?
I think at the end of this, we had one motion for all, I think.
No.
So I see it per
No,
page
Oh,
or
it's
per-
one for each. Okay, we had one for each. Sorry. Okay, so that means we need to back up and have a recommendation, a motion for the outline evaluating the superintendent as presented, and then the format for the evaluation. But maybe if we go through them all, because the last one, the format is the evaluation workbook. I mean, it's listed in this motion here, but we haven't talked about that one.
Did we talk about how we wanted to be communicated with regarding legal actions against the school? Did we have that?
I had sent that out earlier at
Okay.
a meeting to all the rest of you, and under number 8. And it was removed, but I had sent out distribute appropriate information to all board members. This includes notification of legal issues that create liability and potential financial loss for the Newburgh School District, such as Oregon Department of Education investigations, BOLE, Bureau of Labor and Industry claims, torts, and lawsuits. And that was not in the example.
Okay.
And so it would be up to the board if we thought we wanted to put something in about maybe less restrictive or more general or not.
Earlier this, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, we had an executive session with the legal team came from the ESD and gave a update. They want to come again in December and do an update. I think that's pretty thorough, but at the same time, there's little issues that come up all the time. And I don't know exactly, some of them don't seem to be at the board level yet because there's a process, and sometimes with disciplining of staff or whatever it might be, there's an appeals process at the very end where they could appeal to the board. Letting the board know too soon could taint that responsibility. And so it's tough to navigate what to tell the whole board. It's a lot easier for me to navigate what to tell board leadership as opposed to the whole board. So that it's difficult. I don't know a great answer on that.
I was just gonna say, I think it's kind of covered in several of these, it requires that you possess working knowledge of all legal and local policies. And then at number 7, inform the board of all critical information, including relevant trends, anticipated adverse media, critical external, internal change. I think, like you said, is when it gets to that critical point, that kind of is covered there for you're gonna inform us at that point. And number 8, to distribute appropriate information. So I kind of feel like it's covered. I don't think we needed to break it out Because I think once we get to that point that we need our knowledge, it's a expectation that you'll do that. So.
And I also think it takes a little time to figure out, every board's different. Some boards want to know more than other boards. So I think some of this will evolve a little bit as we get to know each other and trust each other and just know each other's styles of, it might be soon enough that I realize that everybody wants to know everything or not, right? So I think we can figure it out.
I mean, I agree with board member Wolfer on this, but I do feel though, compared to what board chair Woodward said in her draft that she omitted out of this, that I think there are some things in there though I think we should be aware about before it becomes maybe more a critical stage. There's things, and again, maybe I hear quite a few things that may be leading up to larger legal actions or compliance complaints to different departments of Oregon. And I'm concerned that if we're not aware of them and it gets handled internally, that's fine, that's your day-to-day job. But there's sometimes seems like if we're board of directors, that we may need to understand some of these, even if it's just more of a generalized topic of like, why is this happening? Because some of these things you could taint the reputation of Newburgh. We're in the school district. We've been through some tough times. It just hasn't been the last 2 to 3 years. There's been a back and forth over the last probably 10 years. And some of that is just transparency of information. And I'm not saying we have to be transparent for everything, because a lot of this could be maybe falling under executive sessions. But I think as a board of directors, though, I believe that some of this should be, it's the trends, like here is talking about like trends, like, well, okay, relevant trends. I don't know. To me, trends is not necessarily critical. Sometimes trends is, okay, hey, we've had X amount of complaints to ODE. Now they haven't come to the board or whatever, or ODE hasn't decided on them, but like, I think we should understand that. And I'm not saying that's a real thing right now. I'm throwing that out in the ether at this point. So I don't necessarily not want to know specifics, but like maybe trends or just understanding of like some stuff that we can maybe try to help. I don't know, navigate, I guess, as a school board and school district. So I'm somewhere in between this and a little more information. Again, I don't need to know very much specifics. I just want to understand what potential things could be coming down the pipe.
So a quick response is, I think if you are hearing things that are troubling, call me and I'll address it and I'll tell you what I know. Because it could be rumor, right? And it could be factual. It could be something that I'm not even aware of, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's where we could start.
Okay.
And then by all means, if your opinion is, boy, I think everybody needs to know about that, then I would then consult with board leadership and we'd go from there.
Yeah, sounds good.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would just say that I would tend to err on we could put more words in this and be more specific, but it's going to come down to discretion. It's going to come down to building that trust. And I guess hoping that if we have a question that we're going to get the response that, would give us what we need. But at the end of the day, I don't think if we put an extra sentence onto any of these demanding X, Y, Z, I think that it should be a little bit higher level, just so hopefully we don't have to get to that point where it says we're not getting this information, and that would be a problem we could talk about. But I hate getting too wordy on something that seems to be kind of a higher level ideal.
Okay, just from my point of view, Dr. Phillips has done a good job of informing me of things like Friday night, that was on the website about, that was for the public to know about at the football game, of maybe potential incident. And unless it's something that I've been told is 100% confidential, my goal is to share it as quickly as possible with all board members so that you're aware. And so I appreciate you letting us know, like the fire, the high school, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't, do you see any issues, Dr. Phillips, with what you're seeing here, what we're about to approve?
No, I went over it
Okay.
and went over it with our chair and vice chair, and I feel good about it. And I did forget to mention when I was addressing Director Hayden, that there are some times where I consult with legal. I'm like, how far, and sometimes their advice is, yeah, call Nancy, let her know. Other times it's not yet.
Yeah.
Whether they think it's gonna blow over or, whatever it might be. So it's.
Yeah, I guess I'll say three things, and I'm basing this on things I've heard. I think as a board, I don't even need to say this, we're all professionals here, right? So, and you're our one employee, and I've worked with you for over 2 years now. Well, not over 2 years, but year and a half, maybe. How long you been in the position? And you're an outstanding person, most integrity. You've got a huge job to do, and in my opinion, you're doing it well. So I think as board members, we have to be careful that we guide, we ask questions, but we allow him to do his job. And we should be here as a support mechanism for him, and recognizing not just with you, but other members of our staff when they're doing a good job, not just when they need correcting, right? I would also say that if we're hearing rumors, I think that, like you said, we need to take those to the appropriate individuals, and that we don't make unfounded accusations at meetings like this, that we try to crack those before we bring them into the open session, where we throw it out into the ether and leave people guessing on what we mean by those things. So I'll leave that at that.
I just want to echo that. I think, like Director DeHart said, we're professionals. I don't like being micromanaged. I've said that from before. I don't want to micromanage, and I like that these are expectations. I think they should be broad and guidelines. And then if need correcting or tightened up later, we could, but I felt like you've done a great job communicating when issues have come up. So.
Okay, well, I'll back up then. If we go follow our action under the recommendation was to have a motion to approve the board's expectations of the superintendent outline, which was the first one. So is there a motion to approve that one?
I move that the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the board's expectations of the superintendent outline as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, the next one was listed the move to approve the outline, evaluating the superintendent, and then to move the format for evaluation. And the evaluation of the superintendent was there, and that also included the huge amount in the back, the superintendent's well, that's a separate recommendation to use the superintendent evaluation workshop. So is there a motion for the outline evaluating the superintendent?
I move that the Newburgh Dundee sorry, other hat, Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the format for the evaluation of the superintendent as presented.
Is there a second? You have a question
Yeah.
for a second?
Are these two different
Well, they're two different-
options
they're
for the
two-
recommendation?
They're two different,
Or are they two different recommendations?
the outline was evaluating the superintendent, and then this one, the evaluation of the superintendent was one that I think Dr. Phillips provided that you said they had used last year.
Yeah, this one
Yeah,
is
Okay.
what was used last year.
Okay.
so yes, there are two different items there. Which just seems like a little maybe overkill, but there are two different documents.
So we're being asked to approve both or one or the other.
Well, I think both. I mean, because they go hand in
Oh.
hand.
So we could do one big motion, or was it two motions within the recommendations?
Well, the way they have it listed here, they have it as two separate motions. So we have
For the format.
for the format, but we don't have a second.
I second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? All
Wait,
those,
which one are we, the outline or the format?
the outline,
Outline, which
No,
is
this
the
was-
grade, which is the
Yeah,
grade text.
right,
I
The
think,
box text.
right.
I thought it was format.
Okay.
It was
I think I
format.
said format.
So we're backwards. So we're doing format first,
Okay.
So we need a
and then we need also one
proper
for,
motion for that. then.
there was for format, and then we also need one for outline.
So we have, I think right now we have a motion and a second for the format. Is that correct?
That's what I heard.
Okay. All those in favor for that? Aye. Trevor, do you want to vote or do you have a further question?
So right now, we're voting on the outline.
The format, because that was the motion that Deb said. Okay. Now, is there a motion to approve the outline?
I'll move that the Newburgh Dudley Public School Board of Directors approve the outline of the evaluating superintendent as presented.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
All those as discussion? All those in favor of the discussion? Okay, got it.
So the evaluation of the superintendent, so we kind of talked about doing quarterly
Mhm.
updates and stuff. Is it, are we voting on that right now or?
No, it's just that this would be probably more of the end product, but use it as a guideline and quarterly.
Yeah,
The goal is to agree upon formats so that, I'm not bringing, like my opinion for evaluation and you
right.
get a different one that we agree upon. I would call it the tool or the format.
Mhm.
And so that was the suggestion by OSBA. And I think, and to, formalize it, so we don't have a discussion like, well, we didn't agree to evaluate this way, that we just agree that we'll use this tool.
Yeah. And I don't have a problem with that. I guess I'm just, if we're gonna do quarterly updates, we use this as a guideline, but this is mostly for the annual
Yes,
final evaluation,
right.
right? I just don't want to make it so erroneous that we're spending.
No, it's
Okay.
for the final, but it's a tool to use also, because it's as the steps to that.
Yeah, I think it should be objective, right?
Right.
So everyone's going off of the same thing and it's, it's transparent to the person being evaluated.
Okay, is there further discussion?
If we're still on the outline, though, no, I have additional comments about the format, though, just to make sure we're all, but we can come back to that in a second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So then we move down to governance. This is us.
Yeah, before we go there, can we though clarify one thing about just the format, that if you look at the format, it says it has the standards 1 through 9, which that does make sense. But I remember this during the OSBA training. After standards 1 through 9, it should be also any individual goals should be following that. And there's not like an example behind that. So I just want to make sure we're all clear in understanding that it's not just 1 through 9. It's also maybe 4 more pages of goal 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the goals are, should be right behind that. And that's actually part of the workbook that actually explains that. But I just want to make sure we all understand that in case we need to rethink the approval or whatever. So.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's how we all understand it. I think, I hope. Okay, the next one is for us, the board governance agreement for Newburgh schools, our responsibilities, how we operate and how we make decisions, how we communicate. And is there discussion?
If I could also just go back and backtrack on what we were,
Sure.
I'm sorry about that.
No, no problem.
Yeah, on that same point though, I feel like part of what we had also had learned about at some of those meetings was the idea that it's tough right now in our first few months to have long-term goals lined up as we're still understanding our roles. And so I do like the idea that there's space to build on there. And I'd hate to say that that's like, we can't move on from there, but yeah, just echoing, I do think it's important that we note that that is something that if we cooperate and decide that that's a standard that we want to do going forward, but yeah.
Yeah, my point of clarification was that if we come in June, oh, there's only 1 through 9. No, there should also be any individual goals. It doesn't matter if it was set, the prior board and that's what we're working on now, or there's new goals that we set, like say this is the next year or whatever. Just saying standards 1 through 9 is just the standards. There's also supposed to be the goals behind it as part of this format, right?
I think that's also covered in the whole workbook that it.
Right,
is
but
under-
I don't,
yeah.
I honestly, I know we're kind of jumping back and forth. I don't know why we have to approve a workbook. It's just a means of a tool. The fact is, what we're trying to do is approve the format of the evaluation. And the format does not have a live example or at least a representation of after standard 9, you should have any individual goals should then be attached here. There's no like blank page that says, and then that's all I'm trying. It's more.
Okay.
I just crossing the, T's, dotting the I type of make sure we understand this, because I don't want to have this discussion or, well, that didn't make sense, when we come back around June and do this again. And that's all I'm just trying to make sure it's clear.
Okay,
So,
I appreciate that. So is it okay to go on to board governance agreements? That's the board, there's 14 agreements. Any discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I move that the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Board of Directors approve the board governance agreement as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Oh, boy. So what is this intended to be? If it's not a policy on how the board governs this type of stuff, what are we looking at here?
My understanding, it was an agreement that the board agrees to about how they behave. Their roles, their responsibilities, what they do not do. That fair?
Yeah, this is one of the things, I think it was in July or August, Dr. Phillips sent to me and said, these are things for, I think the new board needs to consider. And that, as new, for those of us who are new board members, that we communicate how we do our business in a professional manner.
Mhm.
And they're from OSBA. I didn't.
No, I understood. I guess I'm just wondering, is this not in policy or should it not be in policy? Is the intent that each new board member reads this and makes a public statement, they're going to abide by it? I guess I'm a little confused.
I wouldn't call it policy. I think it's an agreement that this is how.
Right. I'm saying because if it's not in policy on how we're going to conduct ourselves, and I know some of this is. Yeah.
Well, you bring up a good point, because what happens if Trevor decides that numbers, whatever, 7, 8, 9 doesn't really care to comply and who says what to Trevor? And, you know, I mean, there's really no teeth,
Right.
you know, and.
Yeah, I guess that's partly what I'm getting at here.
It's kind of just a public commitment, kind of like, I mean, I could come up here and say, hey, I commit to doing all these things, being transparent, or I don't know, something that's not in policy, but we're saying that we're going to commit to it, I guess.
I always call it a gentleman's or gentlewoman's agreement that this is. I look at it as especially kind of in some of the animosity there has been in the community, that we agree that we are going to follow these guidelines. We are going to, you know, obviously follow policy for board meetings, but also just things about how we communicate that, you know, we are going to be respectful and, you know, everybody has a chance to talk. And I just see it as a commitment to the community for me to say, I want us to work well together, and we can disagree and we can still work well together.
And I found that many organizations that I've been on boards for have a typical type of operation agreement, especially around start times and end times, and be respectful about communication and, you know, notify the school administration before visiting the school. That one I hadn't really thought about, although I've signed up for events, but so I'm used to seeing these types of documents.
Is this something that if we approve it could go on the pub, like the webpage for the board? I think this would be something that if we're going to do this, I mean, it's kind of like us communicating it to the public. So maybe having it on the board webpage, like a link to it.
I'm sure we could arrange that if that's what you guys want.
Is it further discussion?
So this is an agreement, and maybe it might be posted on the website. This is just a thought. Should we make sure all board directors are present and agree to this before we pass this? Sorry. I'm just saying, but bottom line, Director Powell's not here, right?
Yeah.
So I think it would be maybe good to maybe postpone this to maybe next meeting, this specific one. So then we all are around the table at the same time and have open discussion and not pass it 6-0 without somebody here.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, since it's not a, 4-3 kind of vote. And like, we all want to say that this is what we're going to do. So I would agree that it would make sense.
Yeah, I do have a question on number 8. Says 2, and then parentheses, 3 or more board members must agree before an item is placed on a meeting agenda. So you're saying that a minimum of 2, so 2 individuals can't put an item on the agenda? Is that what that's saying?
So how, in my 12 years as superintendent, it's always been the board chair sets the agenda. Now, this does seem to say that if 2, 3, or 4, 2 or more board members came together and said, hey, we really want to discuss XYZ, they would contact our board chair. And I still think it's her prerogative to say yes or no. I guess it doesn't exactly say that, but yeah.
So is there, since Jeremy has made a good point that Renee is not, Director Powell's not here tonight. And the next one is board and superintendent operating agreement. So that also would be an agreement for all board members. So is there a motion to table those 2 items until the next meeting? Until all are present?
Yeah, I'll do that. I move that the Newburgh Dundee Public School Board of Directors table.
Not table,
Or not, sorry,
Postpone.
postpone
Yeah.
until the November meeting, the following two items.
Okay, the board governance agreement and the board and superintendent operating. agreement.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
No, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, the last one, was the superintendent evaluation handbook, and if we want to, we can just say we'll use this as a guideline. We don't need to make it official. We can just, if you want to have a motion to use this will be something that we will use as a guide. We can do that. Discussion.
That's smart.
Sorry. So Director Woodward, are you saying, or Chair Woodward, are you saying that you're suggesting that we modify the recommendation to say approve instead of approve the use of the superintendent evaluation handbook? What do you?
Well, we could just say, I mean, this was put on the agenda. It doesn't have to have a motion. I mean, we don't have to
Yeah.
put it a motion. It can just be, we can just agree that we'll use it as a guideline and not even, or if you want to have a motion that you use it as a guideline, and we can just say, we'll use it as a guideline and have no motion.
Yeah, I just say we use it as a guideline.
Like a consensus.
Yeah, consensus. Okay,
I'm good with that.
okay. That concludes board actions. So future agenda items. And the 14th, we will have an executive session starting at 5 PM to do a preliminary. The reason, just for public information, Dr. Phillips' contract is written that he has to have notification not by March 15th, but by February 15th. I mean, his has a 3-year contract, but it's the way it's set up, it's a rolling contract. So we have to let him know if, we would continue another year past the 3 years by February 15th. So that's why I requested to have a preliminary meeting with him as evaluation, and he can have it in public or in private and executive session. And I think you said executive session because we're a novice. And then in our January meeting, we would actually have to have another executive session to say, are we going to actually have a vote if we were going to have an extension to the 3 years, the way the contract's set?
Yeah, so I think we're gonna have several executive sessions soon. The November, my mid-check
Yeah.
kind of eval, December, the legal one, and then January again for my eval. Hopefully we don't need one in February. It looks like we're gonna have 3 in a row. And I can poll you all again about a 5 o'clock start time for those other ones as we get closer.
Okay, next on future agenda technology, Mr. Marlin sent us a questionnaire, and then the school resource officers are going to speak, and then we will select the budget committee member. Those are the known ones. And anybody on the board can always request to put something on the agenda, to notify myself or Dr. Phillips, and we can talk about it when we set the agenda.
I was curious on the September future agenda items. We had food service for October 10th. That never happened. It's not on the agenda anymore. I'm just curious if we're going to get an update on that at any time.
Yeah, our food service director is currently out on leave, and so it hasn't been able to happen.
Any further?
Nothing about future agenda items, but I guess just coming back to the executive session, can we get I think some of us have it, I don't know if all of us, but can we get the current contracts so we can review it, sent to our email so we can review it before the executive session?
Yes. I would assume Tabitha would send it to us, please.
And since you mentioned openly that there's a rolling, I would like to, if somebody can call out what sentence, paragraph, whatever that is, because when I last read it, I did not get the impression that was a rolling, so.
Okay. If there's no other further discussion, is a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Yeah, I know.